Hey folks, welcome to F1 Rolling Start. Every single week we take you under the helmet and over the top inside of Formula One, the fastest sport in the world.
That's right. And this week we have a special episode because the 2023 Formula One season is officially over. As much as it pains us,
Tears us apart.
We don't get to watch Formula One every weekend, but that does not mean that we can't talk about it every single week. And so this week, we are breaking down each one of the teams, each one of the drivers, some fun facts, a lot of stats, and of course, our highly sought after and desired opinion on all things
Very highly sought after.
F1. There's a lot of things that we are going to jump into. I'm James.
I'm Ben.
Let's get rolling. Well, the 2023 F1 season was definitely one to remember, Benjamin. It was a phenomenal moment in history, one that most likely will not be repeated ever again. And so what we're going to do today, dear God, I hope.
The whole F1 world, besides all the Max fans, desperately hopes.
Yes, and obviously Horndog wants this to repeat every year for the rest of his life.
A fantasy, my God.
But the reality is it was a jam-packed season beyond Red Bull's dominance. There were some incredible moments up and down the entire field. And so today's episode is a little bit different because there's no race to review. So let's review the entire season. Yes. And I think there's no better place to start than the constructor champions, Red Bull. And since they're your team.
They're my team.
Why don't you walk us through your observations?
Kick us off, folks. Can I just say, though, as we're getting started here, most weekends during a race weekend, it's consumed.
Yes.
With F1.
Yes.
You understand this if you're an F1 fan. If you're listening to this podcast, obviously you care at all about F1. And this weekend, there was no being consumed by F1.
No.
And so it was a weird feeling. I don't like it. But
there was no FP1, no FP2,
there's no qualifying,
no FP3, no qualifying, no sprint race.
There's no
Crofty,
race. There was no Ted Kravitz.
No before or after show.
I was looking for my podcasts.
Nothing.
And I was
nothing.
Like, all these Brits, they were just like, we're on vacation.
Yeah.
We're on holiday. I'll see you in 3 months. I was like, I'd love to have, however many months off you all have. But we're still here. We're still here.
Exactly.
We're going to go into it. So my boys, the Bulls, this season review for me is going to be a little more statistical.
We love the stats. And apparently a lot of our followers on Instagram think that we don't know anything. So we have a lot of hate. So that's amazing. So we're going to go with stats and prove everybody wrong.
Algorithms are loving it. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. So love to look at some of the numbers. I'm going to look at a couple different statistics for these Red Bull drivers first. The couple of stats I'm going to look at is DNF, did not finish. Second stat I'm going to look at is fastest lap. Third I'm going to look at is how many races was this driver not in first place or not in the top three, and then I'll go through story of the season. So DNF, Max. How many DNFs did Max have? Max had 0. This just talks about the undeniable reliability of the Honda, of the Red Bull. The only other 2 drivers in the entire field who did not have any DNFs the entire season were Danny Ricciardo and Liam Lawson, both of whom
didn't race the whole
season.
Exactly.
So everyone else had, if not one, multiple DNFs. Max is the one who went an entire season with unquestionable reliability.
Right. His teammate had 2 DNFs, but were those mechanical or were those Checo?
Those are Checo.
Those are Checo, right?
Checo being Checo.
It was definitely the Red Bull car was the most reliable.
The Red Bull car was hands down. You could put money on that car with your eyes closed, blindfolded. It was going to finish the race. It was going to score points. So Max has 0 DNFs. Fastest laps. Max has 8 fastest laps. Now, the fastest lap is when you're in the top 10. If you get the fastest lap of the race, you get an extra point. If you're outside the top 10, it doesn't matter. You'll still get the fastest lap stat. There were a few drivers who got it. They didn't get any points. Here's the thing with Max. Not only was he winning undeniably, unstoppably, but even when he was winning, he still went for the fastest lap.
That's right.
Even when he had the championship cinched, he still went for the fastest lap. And this was just talks about kind of his mindset. And we've talked about it in other episodes, how he races, the kind of sportsman that he is. But he had 8 fastest laps, more than anyone else. And the third stat I want to talk about real quick is how many races was he not in first place? If you've paid if you're a human being who lives on planet Earth in 2023, and you even remotely watch the news or some sports news, you will have heard that Max was only not in first place 3 times out of the entire season.
Incredible.
So again, for me, the story of the season for Max, for Red Bull, specifically for Max though, is just he made dominance as consistent as just clockwork.
Yep.
And there are few athletes in this world, in the history of the world, that have been able to do that, to have been able to be so reliably dominant where you count on it, where you expect it, where if they're not, you're stunned. And that's what Max really did. I mean, in qualifying in Monaco,
that was insane.
See this racecraft where he has to shave off 0.3 of a second in Monaco, one of the tightest tracks of the season.
The tightest.
He's down to Alonso. Alonso had secured pole position, which if he had secured pole position, he very well
most likely would have won the race.
Max shaves off 0.3 in the final sector. No one at that point could deny what was happening with the season and who this kind of driver was. So those are the things I've got on Max this year. Just savage talent, utter dominance.
It was insane. The whole thing was incredible. Red Bull ended the season with 860 points in the constructors. 575 of those were Max's. 67% of the points that the team won were from Max. And, you know, my hat is off to not just Red Bull, but Max specifically. Where do you go from here? I mean, perfection is available. There's 24 races next season, I believe. And so he theoretically could try again. But you got to stay back. You got to say, well done. I don't think it was just the car. I think it was Max and that car. Yes. He was focused. He was consistent. He was dedicated. So you said 0 DNFs. One of the reality is that he finished every lap this season. There's 3 drivers that have done that. Hamilton, Michael Schumacher, and now Max Verstappen.
The 3 most winningest.
And so it's pretty incredible when you say DNFs. Like the reliability that the team gave him was next to incredible.
And this was not the case in Red Bull just a few years ago. They were known for their unreliability.
Right.
They were known for their engines and their power units failing.
Renault.
Wasn't going to name names, Renault. Wasn't going to name names. But yeah, they were known for their unreliability. And so I mean, again, it's the man, it's the machine. Because the second driver for Red Bull, Checo, he has 2 DNFs, Japan and Mexico. Mexico was a heartbreaking DNF.
Man, that was rough.
It was his home, his people. Hundreds of thousands are there for him. And he is trying to go for the lead. He crashes out. And so he only had 2 out of the entire season, which again was hard racing. Right. It was a driver error, but he was going for the gap and he was trying to lead, trying to win.
Yep.
He had 2 fastest laps the entire season, next to Max's 8. Races in the top 3, he had 9. Races in the top 5, he had 15. So he didn't do poorly, and we all talk about this. He finished second.
He finished second in the constructors. He did an incredible job.
First time Red Bull locks out 1-2. First time they do that as a team. But when you put him next to Max, he's so far off just because of how far ahead otherworldly Max is that it looks as if it's not a great thing, right?
Yeah.
I think the story for the season that I have for Checo is this concept of being unequally matched. I think with his teammate, Horner talked about this towards the end of the season, where he's like, listen, a lot of these other teammates, they're a lot closer to each other. We need Checo to get closer to Max. He's too far apart. With the RB19, if it was Checo as the lead driver, and let's throw Sargent in there just for kicks and giggles, right? Let's say it's Checo and Sargent. You know where that team would be? They would not be number one. They'd be in the midfield. Maybe they'd be best of the rest. Right. Maybe. But Checo just couldn't get a hold of the car. And so I would just say for me, this season with Checo, he kind of met his match, and he couldn't wrangle that thing in.
Yeah, I would say Checo, he scored 285 points. If you double that, they still would have won the Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, I mean,
so he definitely did his part. It was interesting to me. Yeah, he was second. He won 33% of that, and when you look at it, his race results in comparison to his teammate, it's not an awesome story to look at. Now he finished second, and that is nothing to snuff at. I don't even know if that's what you say, but it's a good accomplishment. I would say for Checo, the hard thing is that he just had a really tough season.
Yeah.
Anyone who's raced with Max since Danny Rick left has not been able to match Max. It was interesting because Alex Albon came out and he explained what it was like being Max's partner. And he disagrees with everyone who says that the car is developed around Max. He says that the car is developed by the team, and maybe it is now. But the reality is that Max loves a pointy car with a lot of front end, and he makes it sharper and sharper and sharper as the season goes on. And so then as your teammate, you start to go like, well, I guess I need my car to be sharper. So then you try to drive the way that Max drives in Max's setup, and you spin out, you lose confidence, you lose the ability to do it. And so every single race, he's getting a tenth, and you're getting a bigger gap and a bigger gap and a bigger gap. And if you look at statistically, Albon's season in comparison to Max and his race pace versus Max's race pace, actually, Alex Albon has been the best teammate that Max has had since Daniel Ricciardo. And Checo has now fallen behind that mark. As good as a racer as he is, it's this idea that Max's driving is just aggressive to the point of precision. It is like the way that Alex describes it is like, when you have your mouse on a computer and you turn the sensitivity all the way up and you move it a tiny bit and it darts across the screen. That's the kind of front end that Max likes on his car. And so when you're not able to live that way and drive that way, like you can't get as much out of the car as possible. Yeah, wow. And so it's an incredible testament to the driver. But overall, Red Bull had a historic season. Absolutely historic season.
And again, Sergio, he scores in every single race but 3 races.
Yeah.
And 2 of those are the ones that he crashes out. Monaco, he got 16th. And he crashed out in qualifying in Monaco. Yeah. So really, like, he is scoring points every single race. And there's really no other driver that did that. So
no, the hard part is that your teammate is, actually, I'm not that great at math, but almost has double the amount of points that you have. And so, or more than. And so the question is asked by the team, who can match Max, which has been for a while. And so I'm not sure what next year looks like for Checo. Obviously he has the seat, it's confirmed, but it's only 1 more year on his contract. And so dependent on what 2024 looks like for Checo, that's going to be the story of next year for Red Bull. Max is going to be dominant again. Max is going to rip again. The car is going to be amazing again.
Yes.
And so we'll see what what it looks like. Red Bull, man, one for the history books. You know what is also not necessarily one for the history books because it's the same story over and over again? It's Haas. Let's talk about Haas. So they scored 12 points and came dead last in the story of the 2023 season.
It was a toughie. It was a toughie for Haas. Same statistics for their drivers. So here's the thing. I love Hulk.
You love numbers.
I love
and you love
numbers.
Hulk.
I love Hulk. I'm glad he's back. I'm glad Magnussen's back. Both those guys were out of F1.
Yep.
If you think about that for a second. When you are leaving, when you're gone, when you are
Magnussen's the biggest I told you so because he got kicked out for Schumacher and the Russian oligarchy and then ends up coming back to the same seat that one of those rookies gave up.
So that in and of itself is an exciting thing about Haas.
Yeah.
We love Haas as a team. One thing that we always will do, though, is we'll be very honest and upfront about results.
Exactly.
Stopwatch never lies. It's the most honest
100%.
sport in the world, right? That's what Toto always says. So with Haas, for Hulkenberg, this is the crazy thing. Hulkenberg only had one DNF the entire season.
Yeah.
One.
That
guy was consistent. He only had
solid
one DNF. He didn't have any fastest laps, but again, he's in a Haas. It ain't going to happen. Races where he was not in the top 5, all of them. In Australia, it was the possibility.
It was close.
Of a podium. Hasn't happened. Unfortunately, Australia was as close as he was going to get. Didn't happen. Here's the thing, though. I think the story of the season for Hulk is just consistent.
Yeah.
He came back to a team that was struggling, that did not have consistency. They brought him in because he's consistent. Exactly. And he performed. He outperformed his teammate who had been on that team. And 3
times the amount of points than Magnussen. You know, I agree. I think Hulkenberg came back and he had a phenomenal season for what car he was in. To me, you can't judge their drivers based off of the results that they got in the race, but I think you can judge them based off of qualifying. Because Haas was not, it wasn't up there qualifying with the Red Bulls, but it actually was in the top 10 several times last season.
Absolutely.
And so I think it was a really good qualifying car. And that's where Hulk really started to shine, is that he was performing within the Haas ranks in such a way that he was out driving that car. Now, the car had 0 race pace. For me, the story for them is it's a full overhaul next year, again, for Haas.
"Quote unquote" full overhaul. I don't know what that means.
Exactly. Do you remember when they had the Rich Energy guy that came in and he tried to, they had the full brand on the car and everything.
He bailed
because he was like, "You guys just suck. Like, you're not the underdog."
They had the Russian backers.
And then they had the Russian backers. And then the war in Ukraine, and then they had to kick them out.
Then they were like getting funding from Aldi.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yes. Okay, but here's the thing. To me, they are the underdog without any limbs. They are like one of those dogs that has the wheels at the back that you think is kind of cute and you feel a little sorry for, but you're never going to adopt.
Yeah.
And they're just yapping at all the big dogs. To me, it's like, at what point do we go, there needs to be a ground up overhaul? It's not the car. It's got to be something more than the car. Yeah. The team's not operating right.
Yeah.
The car's not operating right. The leadership isn't getting everybody heading in the same direction. And so I don't know what 2024 looks like, but I bet all of my money and all of your money that they will be, you're welcome. They will be in the bottom 3 again. Yeah, like that's a whole $20. And so
I mean, I think you're hitting on something that we've talked about, that others have talked about as well. Here's the thing, and the American in me, and Haas is technically the American team, right? The American in me is so drawn to the underdog.
100%.
I want them to do well. Whenever there's
Yes.
a glimmer. Remember when Magnussen was
Oh
on
my
pole
gosh,
in
dude. It
Brazil
was
last
amazing. I
year?
was so excited.
Minds, and they were out there at the right time, but they were there and they had the time.
Pole
and
is
he got
pole.
And so, like, it's those little glimpses and
Yes.
like that electrify you for this team, and we all want that.
Yes. We want representation
again,
that we can be proud of.
But again, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I understand being
Pain.
electrified for those little things year after year after year, and it just never ever panning out. So at some point, it's like, okay, what are we gonna do? So anyway, yeah, I would say that about Haas. The one thing I'll say about Mag, this was interesting as I was doing these numbers. All of his numbers are the same as his teammates, except his DNFs. He had 5. His teammate only had 1.
Right.
So again, there's always context to every single one, whether it's reliability, whether it's mistakes made by the driver. But again, they brought back Hulk for consistency. And the bro delivered. Isn't costing them money.
No.
Right? Whereas Magnussen had several more DNFs. I think the story of the season, because I love Magnussen, I just have the car was not worthy of the Viking.
No.
This guy, he knows how to race. We've seen it in years past. The car couldn't keep up with him this year.
No, not at all. And that was Haas's story. Look, my prediction for Haas next year is that, Lance Stroll just sold part of his ownership of Aston Martin, which evaluated the Aston Martin F team at like $1.2 billion. 7 years ago when Liberty took over F1, you could buy, a team got bought for £1. I don't know what team, but I bet it's probably the one we just talked about. And now they're evaluated at, I think Aston Martin's 1.2. Like I said, I think I read an article that McLaren is somewhere in the mid 500 million range evaluation, and Alpine's at 800 million, which doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess when you have Ryan Reynolds signed on,
it's all that new money they pumped in.
But to me, the point is this: is I think Haas, what they need to get better is money. And if Gene starts,
I don't get why.
If Gene starts,
investors, I don't understand,
because they don't have the history. But if someone goes, Gene, I want a controlling interest in this, and it's going to take what you've invested and exponentially increase your net worth, but I want to have voting rights and I want to have all of those kind of benefits that come along with that kind of investment, I think we will see a massive turnover within Haas. Then I think we would see results follow within 5 years. My thought would be Otmar Safnauer.
I was literally just going to say that. Yeah.
And run that team. And in 5 years, he could be winning podiums.
Yeah.
But it would be a long-term plan across an engine change and a car change and everything. So that's my last ticket on Haas, and then we bump back up to the constructors, to my team, Mercedes, who came in with 409 points, ended the season.
That's good.
It's good. 3 points ahead of Ferrari is number 2 spot. Bittersweet for me. I think we made the best with what we had. We had an extremely reliable car. Yeah. I think we also had 2 drivers that were driving better than that car was. And I think for the first 2/3 of the season, we mopped up as many points as we could.
Yeah.
And then for the last third of the season, we held on for dear life. And it was down to the wire. And we won second place by the skin of our teeth. And this, the heartbreaking thing for me is this is the second year running for us. And so, the first year you get a pass because it's a brand new car. Second year, everyone thinks you're going to come out the gates and take it straight to Red Bull and you're going to give them the what for. Now, that didn't happen in any way, shape, or form this year from Mercedes. And so my fear is that as we go into 2024 and they've thrown out the entire concept, they've gone back to ground zero and they've started again. If Mercedes doesn't come out taking it to Red Bull, Mercedes, the narrative of F1 for the last decade now changes. It's no longer Mercedes and Red Bull fighting.
Yes.
It's now Red Bull dominance.
Yes.
Mercedes is part of the rest of the mid-pack, and they're trying to catch up.
Yes.
And that, to me, I think will drive the team and its drivers insane. And I think in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think, we had a great season. Hamilton winning 234 points, 57%. Russell coming in at 175, 43%. Honestly, pretty evenly matched.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. That's pretty evenly matched.
They qualified. They both qualified in front of each other 11 times. So they were even on the qualifying for the whole season. I think that both drove better than that car deserved. And going into next year, if they have a good car, then the drivers will be able to wring the neck out of it. Yeah. I think for me, what really solidified this year with Mercedes is Russell deserves that spot on that team.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. No,
there's no doubt anymore about it.
He came from Williams, a underperforming team in the past. Not the Williams of today that is, starting to perform again, starting to look like a contender again. And I was a little skeptical because they were saying goodbye to Bottas, who's a race winner, multiple race winner,
mega race winner,
and bringing in kind of an unknown factor in some respects. But yeah, absolutely, he has earned his spot there. A couple of things I thought were interesting as far as some of the data from this year. Hamilton didn't finish once and was disqualified once. There's disqualification happened in Austin, and we've talked about that in previous podcasts. He had 4.
The floor is too thin. Wait, the floor is too thin.
The floor. It's going too fast. He had 4 fastest laps.
Solid.
He was not in the top 5 only 10 times.
Which pretty much that's generous. It's pretty much half the season.
Yeah, but he was more than 50%. He was in the top 5. Which for the struggles of Mercedes.
For the struggles of Mercedes is fine for the 7-time world champion and the most podiums in the history of F1. It's not fine.
Not fine.
Not fine at all.
Which is why my story of the season for Hamilton is Shadow Man.
I think that's a great word for him.
Because, there's these moments where I remember this blisteringly well in my brain. I was a kid, and Michael Jordan was no longer on the Bulls. This was past his winning years. And there was, I believe, a season where he came back and was playing for like the Washington Wizards or something. Man, I remember seeing a picture.
How weird is that?
It was insane. I need to almost fact check this because I almost don't believe it, but it's so burned in my brain because I saw a picture of him and I'm like, you're not the same guy. You're not the same guy. Or like,
that's how you felt when he was playing. Either way, when he was playing baseball.
Yeah.
You were like, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
When you were like pro golfing, what are you doing?
Or like Tiger Woods, where he's so dominant.
Yep.
He has so much kind of stuff happening. And then he just becomes something that he's not himself. Hamilton, here's the thing. It is critical that Mercedes gets their stuff together and starts winning again, because Hamilton is at an intersection here. And you're starting to see his confidence go. There was moments this year where you saw the fire again, you saw the spark again, but more often than not, you saw a man who wasn't himself.
100%. Well, he admitted that in articles. He was interviewed, and basically what he said was like, I am a human.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, when the results come in, the question I have to ask myself is it the car or is it me?
Absolutely.
And he's like, and some days I thought it was me. Some days I 100% believed it was the car. Yep. And so the reality is that I think you're right. They're at a pivotal point where I don't think he will go to another team.
No, that's not.
I don't think that's going to do it. He's not. It's not like Alonso, who stepped away for years and then came back in his late 30s. Hamilton hasn't left, and so when he steps away, he'll be in his 40s, and the likelihood of him coming back is not impossible because the guy looks like he's in his 20s still. Guy has better flipping washboard abs than Ryan Gosling. Like, it's incredible. But I don't think he'll come back. I think he will be done. And I think he wants to end in a great way.
He wants to win.
He wants to win. Winning. He is a winner.
As he should.
100%.
So I think, for me, like, it is difficult to see what you're not sure if it's the decline of the GOAT or if it's just a season where that person is lost and trying to find themselves. Yep. And so it is my deep hope not as a Mercedes fan, but as a race fan,
Yes.
that Mercedes finds themselves, picks
100%.
themselves back up, gives their driver a freaking competitive car,
Yes.
so we can see the man again.
Exactly.
He's been lost this year. So that was
it's up to the team. It's up to the team.
It is, of course.
And I think they need to give him and Russ a really good car. Russell also had a pretty good season, though.
Yeah. No, Russ. He had 3 DNFs. Singapore was particularly
heartbreak
brutal.
in Singapore for
Last
Russell.
lap, he's going for the win. Sainz and his brilliance, of course, is towing along Lando to keep him out of reach of the Mercedes. But
the dynamic duo themselves.
But it was an incredible race, and you really saw what this season would have looked like if Red Bull wasn't a team.
Exactly.
It was Ferrari, it was Mercedes, it was McLaren, and they were all going at it.
Yes.
So Russ crashes out, which is a bummer in Singapore. That's one of his DNFs. He had one fastest lap this season. The races where he was not in the top 5, he had 13 of those. So more races not in the top 5 than in the top 5. And I think the story of the season for me is that here's a guy who's faster than his car.
Yeah.
We've seen Russ win. We've seen him get podiums. We've seen him be competitive. And it was difficult to see a guy who can do more, but is confined to the limitations of his vehicle and his tool at the end of the day. And so,
I think this was also a shaping season for Russell. I think he was. Yeah. I think he learned a lot this season. He had some big moments, like in Singapore when he just was following Lando and was 1 inch too far over and destroyed his car on this. I think it was the second to last lap, and it was it was heartbreaking. The moments where he was arguing with his engineers about track position, the moments where he lost out in qualifying or couldn't get the car tied in. I think this was a big maturing season for Russell.
Yeah.
I think we forget that, yes, he drove for Williams and yes, he's really fast, but this is only his second season at a top tier team.
Yeah.
And with the strongest, or, arguably, them and Red Bull and Ferrari have the biggest teams, the biggest infrastructure, all of it. Yeah. The guy is thrown in the deep end from the scrappy Williams. Yeah. And I feel like he's stepped into it fully this year. Yeah. And I think if they put the car underneath him next year, I think he will drive the pants off of it. And honestly, I think him and Hamilton will push each other. I think they will really push each other.
I agree. I am excited for the day that they have a competitive car and we can see them race.
Yes.
Not just the Red Bull and the Ferrari, but them race each other.
Exactly. Now we got to jump down to the back end of the field again. So number 9 was Alfa Romeo. Currently Alfa Romeo, to be announced on the 10th of December what their new team name is. Pretty exciting.
That's a couple days.
Alfa Romeo Saba. And, this is going to be quick because they had 16 points. Bottas had 10. Guan Yu Zhou had Zhou Guan Yu, had 6. I don't really have much to say about this team. They didn't really do anything all year. They didn't develop. Everything that they tried on the car didn't work. Halfway through the season, they decided to throw the car out for next year and start from the ground up again. And so I'm hopeful that they'll come into next year with their new name and with a new car and maybe be more competitive, because historically they have been pretty good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're in this limbo for me, and all of their press releases say that they're not. But in 2026, when the engine regulation changes and Audi comes into the sport, this is Audi's team.
Yeah.
And they will become Sauber Audi. And they've got 1-2 years, 2024 and 2025, under this new title sponsor to do something. But I don't know what they can do over the next 2 years.
Yeah.
They haven't been able to get their feet together throughout this new ground effects regulations.
I'm struggling for words.
There's not much to say.
There really isn't. I mean, both drivers had 3 DNFs across the season. There was a fastest lap at the beginning. Joe Guanyu had, but he was outside of the top 10, so it didn't matter. Bottas had 0 fastest laps. They were not in any race, at any circuit, at any part of the world in the top 5.
No.
At all. And so I think, I can make up something for the story of the season, but the story of the season is that we're struggling for words because it was just such a difficult, challenging season for this team. So I think there is change on the horizon.
Yeah.
With change, with new energy, with new partnership, there's always a lot of potential.
Yeah, for sure.
That's waiting to be seen. But I think for now, it was just a really difficult season, especially for Bottas, who is again someone who came from the top.
Yes.
Talk about falling.
Yeah.
To the bottom. But here's the thing though, in the conversations that he's had, or in the conversations folks have had who are close to him, I don't know that he is as decimated as maybe others would be. There's been conversations around how while he was at Mercedes, there was things in his personal life or his health that weren't well, that weren't right.
Right.
And so part of me thinks that
he's healthier.
He's better.
Yeah.
In a team where he's not.
He's probably a better person. The problem is that
I feel like he actually is probably.
He probably is. I think the hard thing is that sports is a tough place to be. And there's a lot of light on you. You choose it. And to me, and this could be personality type, I just didn't really see the drive. About halfway through the season, both of them just seemed defeated in every, it was very kind of like, okay, yep. Car wasn't set up. Oh, it was struggle. Man, we were kind of disappointed because we didn't see this. We didn't do that. To me, I'm like, the drivers weren't inspired. The team wasn't inspired.
No.
And so you're not going to get any results out of that. And I don't think they should get any more of this time either. No. And so we get to jump back up to the fun end of the field, which is Ferrari, number 3 for the season, 406 points, only 3 shy. It came down to the last race in Abu Dhabi. It was so close. I'm going to say one thing before we jump into the stats, and that is this, is that as a Mercedes fan, it's hard for me to say this, but I will say it anyway. I think their drivers deserved the championship.
Wait, sorry, say that again?
I think their drivers deserved second in the championship, not the championship as a whole. I think Leclerc and Sainz, the way that they both drove and how they conducted themselves this season, mostly Leclerc, deserved second place.
I love that.
I think their team didn't support them. Their team wasn't there for them, whether it was Zandvoort, where they had terrible pit stops where they didn't even have the tires ready for Leclerc, or it was Hungary where there was tire strategy blunders, so they miss out of Q3 and they're out of position and out of luck. No matter how good you're driving, if you're starting in the middle of the pack and there's Red Bulls ahead and there's Mercedes ahead and there's Aston Martin and McLaren ahead of you, it's going to be really hard to fight your way up into the points. To me, their drivers deserve second place. I think it was evident in the last race of the season. It was evident in Singapore when Carlos was calling out strategy from leading the flipping race. And I just think they need to get their team needs to get their feet together. The drivers had the passion. It didn't feel like the team did.
Strong words, especially speaking of an Italian team, but you're right. At the end of the day.
Thank you, Ben.
No, you're right. Speaking about the Italian team. Well, one of the Italian teams, but are we really counting the other one? No. It's Ferrari. Some quick data. Charles Leclerc had 4.
I don't think that's how you say it.
I just went for it. He had 4 DNFs and 1 disqualification that came in Austin. So 5 where he didn't actually finish. Carlos Sainz only had 2 DNFs.
This next stat you're about to share actually baffles my mind.
I had to double check this.
Yeah, we had to fact check this.
Believe my brain.
This is out of control.
But neither driver had a fastest lap this year.
Man.
That's what the data is telling me. Now we can go back. We'll do
Ferrari. did not have a fastest lap this year. That's
stunning
wild
to me because of how quick they are in qualifying.
Yes.
But neither driver has a fastest lap.
That is wild.
Number of races that Charles is not in the top 5 is 11. Number of races Sainz is not in the top 5 is 12. So actually right about even there. I think for me, the story of the season for Charles was, here's a guy who knows what he is capable of.
Yep.
He's seen glimpses of what his team is capable of.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this year there was so much of just him knowing it was possible and not being able to attain it. And so I just feel like there was so many moments where he was just sighing. It was just like, what can I say? Like, he's trying to defend the team. He's trying to speak well about the team. And there's just so many moments of just bewilderness or frustration, or just him at the end of the interview just being just like
disappointed.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I thought that was the story of his season. For Sainz, this was hard. I had a hard time trying to kind of encapsulate his season. He's the only other driver who actually won a race, which is a big deal.
This is a big deal.
He's going up against
good job, Sainz.
He's going up against folks who across the year have been as competitive, if not more competitive, have had faster cars, and he pulls out a race win. And so I think, some folks might not like this, but I think for him, the story of the season is, I think he's kind of best of the rest. He does the thing.
Bold statement, Ben.
I know it's bold. I was stunned by myself. I was like, are you actually going to say this? He did the thing no one else could do.
So you think if Sainz was Max's teammate, he would have more points than Checo?
I want to go that far.
Well, that's best of the rest.
What I mean is, when the opportunity presented itself, he performed flawlessly.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't crash out like Russell. He didn't get stuck in second place without being able to overtake like Lando.
Yeah.
He didn't, and Hammy, if he had a couple more laps, if anyone has a couple more laps, after the race is over, sure, you'll get the overtake done. But he didn't end up in third. The man was brilliant when the one opportunity the entire season presented itself.
Exactly.
And the rest of the field wasn't.
Yeah.
And so F1 is all about taking what is available to you when it presents itself.
You're only as good as your last race.
And so, for me, I think it's a bold statement. I was hesitant to even say it, but I think he stepped up in a way that no one else did the entire season.
I think for me, for Ferrari, the season was surmised by the drivers did a phenomenal job. They really did. Freddie Vasseur, the new team boss, his first season with Ferrari, he needs to make some significant operational changes. We're still not seeing the right strategy. He's already made comments about it. He's the first one to say it. The team has the pedigree. The team has the name. It has the history. It has the drivers. It now needs the team that is focused behind it. Yeah. Max was dominant, not just because Max is incredible. His team was with him. Their pit stops were incredible. Their strategy was undeniable. That is why they were unbeatable. And if Ferrari can match their strategy and their team and their car with their drivers, then they will be in a place, as basic as that sounds, but that's what they're missing. Yeah. They're missing that. They need to become out of the box thinkers instead of, we are the most winningest team of all time and we have the name and the pedigree. Okay, great, but you're not winning right now. So,
and you haven't been.
Change something and figure it out. And I think Freddie is the right guy to do that.
Absolutely.
And that's how we wrap number 3, which is Ferrari.
One quick thing I'll just say.
No, I wrapped it.
Did you know that Red Bull is only the 5th most winningest team? Ferrari is so far ahead.
Ferrari has so many wins.
I saw the stat.
So many wins.
God, where is this?
I watched an infographic and it was like one all the way up.
Unreal.
So we jump back down again and we come to the most complicated team of the entire season.
They had 4 drivers this year.
They had 4 freaking drivers, and it was AlphaTauri. 25 points, an exciting season to watch.
Absolutely.
As it progressed. I don't know if it was the most developed car, but I know that they had 6 different variations of the floor on their car, which is the most important part of the car in this new age of Formula One. For me, the story of the season is Yuki has proved to the entire F1 community that he is not a pocket-sized cutie, and he is a bona fide F1 driver. He has had 3 different teammates, and every single one of them within the time, not just totally, but within the time that they were his teammate, he outscored every single one of them.
Yep.
And I think he deserves an incredible amount of recognition this season. He brought home 68% of the points for his team, almost 70% of their points.
That's a stunning statistic, actually.
In that last race,
that's more than Max.
Almost won it for them. Yes, that's more than Max for his team. Yeah. I mean, Hulkenberg brought in 75% for Haas, but it's only 9 points. So, the lower the points get, the more dramatic the percentages get. But at the same time, I thought it was interesting. Ricciardo brought in 24, Lawson brought in 8, and then the famed, with great expectation, Nick DeVries brought in a big old goose egg of points.
That's tough. No, that's so well said. I mean, for me, the statistics here don't really matter that much because they're all kind of the same. There was at no point throughout the year was any of these drivers in the top 5. No. Although Yuki did lead a race for 5 laps, which was exciting.
Which he didn't know about, but he was very excited about after the race.
None of them had a fastest lap, save Yuki. He did have one fastest lap.
Yep.
There was a couple of DNFs. I mentioned before, Danny Rick, Liam, neither had a DNF, but again, they only raced a couple of races the entire year. DeVries had 2, part of the reason that led to his early exit. Yuki had 2 himself. But the thing about Yuki, and I'll say this is kind of the story of the season for him, I just feel like the phrase that came to my mind was just, come at me, bro.
Literally.
Like, you are putting this guy under immense pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You're bringing in someone who is vocally stating, I'm going to come in and lead this team. I'm
going to run the show.
I'm going to run the show. He's gone. You bring back Honey Badger. The F1 world is wigging out. This guy comes in, breaks his hand. He's out. Gone. You bring in Liam Lawson. Liam Lawson does score in Singapore.
Great racing.
His maiden boy
did a phenomenal job.
Phenomenal. Danny Rick comes back and
still can't
see this
get
guy,
it together. Yeah.
Yuki just say, okay, keep coming.
Cool. Keep coming. I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to score points. I'm going to finish where I finish. I'm going to qualify where I qualify. I thought he did a great job. It was a very interesting season for me watching AlphaTauri. Here's the thing about AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri is literally Red Bull's baby sister.
Yeah.
AlphaTauri means
sister team.
Bull. And so that was their clothing brand that was sponsoring this line. Originally, this started as Toro Rosso. Here's the thing for me with this team this season. It was the closing of a door because Franz Toss, who was the starter of this when Red Bull went ahead and bought that other F1 team, he has been there since day one. This was his last season as the team boss. They're bringing in a new team boss next season. They've moved away over the last few years from being basically a miniature Red Bull car to now they were trying to do their own parts, their own aero, all this kind of stuff. Now they're moving back next year to purchasing more of Red Bull's parts that they can within legality within the F1 rules. They're embracing their persona as a Red Bull team and still pushing for innovation. They still have their own engineers and everything, of course. But I think the reality is that this team that has had such an impact on the sport. I mean, people that have come through this team are Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
Ricciardo, he didn't start on this team, but he made his name on this team. Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, like incredible drivers over the years
absolutely
have made their name with this Toro Rosso AlphaTauri team, and now it's the closing of a door and the starting of a new season. And I love that it's Yuki and Danny Ricciardo next year, coming with a competitive. Even if they were to just say, "Hey, we're not going to develop a new car, and we're just going to buy Red Bull's RB19," it would be. They can't do that. But if they
Mercedes might want to do
Mercedes might do it. They pull like oh my gosh, they pull a Force India and just copy it. And I just think like it's going to be a great season next year as they embrace their new persona. They were so competitive towards the back end of the season. Like
really
it was wild.
They really were.
They had Williams on the edge of their seat on that last race because Yuki was out driving that car.
Yeah.
Great season for them.
Really great, exciting for what's next. I'm hoping that they're able to take the momentum that they picked up at the back end of the season and carry that into the new year. And so they've got some good drivers, and it'll be exciting to see what they look like next year.
100%. And that takes us to number 4 in the championship this year. This was really surprising to me. McLaren. If you had told me McLaren was going to be number 4 after the first 3 or 4 races in the year, I would have bet a lot of money against that. Because they were trash.
Laughing.
Yes, they were absolute trash. 302 points. Norris did 205. Piastri did 97. But what an underdog story. Like, legitimately, so surprising. What an incredible year. To me, the only thing that I love Norris, been a big fan of him for a while. But man, Piastri's first season, this guy coming in with the mounted pressure of taking the spot of an 8-time race winner, which was Daniel Ricciardo, and all of the drama that surrounded that. Zach Brown saying this is the guy of the future.
Yeah.
Him coming in and having the season that he had, pushing Lando the way that he pushed Lando, racing with him. There was definitely some moments where you could see he was a rookie driver, trying to get to terms with the tires and the tracks that he's never raced on before. But overall, I mean, he won Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was a real tough race between him, De Vries, Sargent.
Don't want to talk about Sargent.
But anyway, I was really
number 21.
I loved McLaren towards the back end of the season.
Yeah.
Hyper focused. I think they got hopefully all of their like kind of like jitters and scrapping with the top teams. All of those little things that come up in those idiosyncrasies that start to surface, and the problems in your systems and your processes started to surface for them when they were scrapping with Red Bull and Mercedes and Ferrari, because they just don't necessarily live in that territory.
Yeah.
And so I think now that that's kind of like, oh man, we can learn a lot from this coming into next year. They are ones to watch out for.
Absolutely. A couple of data points for them. Lando, he only has 1 DNF this year. He has 1 fastest lap over the season. Total races where he was not in the top 5 were 12. Now, that isn't really indicative of his season. That mostly happened at the front end of the season. Towards the middle and the back half was when he really turned it on. I think the story of the season for me is you see a guy who, you talk about Piastri feeling some pressure coming in Ricciardo's seat, coming in with all the hype, but you've got Lando who is now having to deal with cool man Luke over here who's performing. And there's a moment where he turns it on. And for me, the story of his season is that he proves himself as the front man for McLaren. That became evident. There was a moment in the middle where we were wondering about it.
Those
Piastri
last 5 races, though, all wonder went out the door.
He turned it on.
Norris is their lead driver. There's no doubt about it.
No doubt. And that was an incredible thing to see him step up. There was moments of frustration, especially in qualifying, especially when he made mistakes where he felt that he could have locked P1 and he didn't, take the opportunity, or he made a mistake. And so, but it was incredible to see him prove himself in that way. For Piastri, Piastri had 3 DNFs this year as opposed to Lando's 1. He had another fastest lap as well. Races where he was not in the top 5 was actually 18. So
quite a lot.
He did really well, but there was definitely still a distance between him and his teammate.
And he got to harvest the points when he won the sprint race.
Sprint race,
and that was a shiny moment for him. honestly incredible. I don't know if you had told him at the beginning of the season, hey, you're going to win a sprint race this season. I don't think he would have thought that would have been in scope for him. I thought it was a great season for McLaren. What was interesting to me is that so the percentages of the points won. Max won 67% of Red Bull's points. Checo won 33%. Lando won 68%. And Piastri won 32%.
That's fascinating.
And so what you're looking at there is pretty much the same percentage break. Piastri, this was his first season in Formula One. This was not Checo's first season in Formula One. And Norris is an incredible driver. And so to me, it's I think if we go into next year, I think that number will dramatically come down.
Yeah.
And I think he will start pushing now that he has the experience. I think we're going to see some incredible
We
things.
need to track that year over year.
That would be pretty fun.
Yeah.
Well, we have all of the documents.
We do.
Shout out to Google Drive. What a freaking year we are in store for next year if McLaren comes into 2024 with the kind of car that they had. They know Zach Brown, make it happen. They know their weaknesses and they are actively addressing them. We need to jump into one of our favorite teams, which is easy for us to talk about. We love 100% of this team. We love 50% of their drivers, and that is Williams. They scored 28 points. Albon scored 96% of their points.
Oh my!
He scored 27 of the 28 points. Logan Sargent scored 1 point because of Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc's disqualification in Austin. My thought around Williams is
I just get angry.
We need to fix this limp.
Yes.
I'm like, this is Latifi all over again. Latifi had a terrible season and they were like, no, we see the improvement. We love it. Let's keep Latifi. And I wonder if it's just kind of like, well, we don't know who to put in the car. Like, who else are we supposed to put in this car? They can't put a Red Bull driver in it. They can't take Liam and say, hey, do you want this car? He's not going to do it. You know what I mean?
I feel like there's options. I'm going to go straight to my story this season for the other Williams driver. I'm not going to say his name. I'm just going to call him the anti-Lawson. There's Lawson, and then there's the anti-Lawson. Lawson shows up and just performs. The man races.
Yes. Same with Piastri.
And same with with Piastri. And then you've got the American in there who DNFs 4 times. Now here's actually the crazy thing.
Man.
Alex Albon also DNF'd 4 times. Now, did he cause as much damage as Sarge? Probably not.
No.
Different DNFs.
Not even close.
I need to look.
I'll look it up right now.
Fact check it.
You keep talking. I'll look it up.
Sarge DNFs 4 times. He has Z fastest laps. He's nowhere near not just the top 5, the top 10, top 15, pretty much the entire season. And it's one of these things where I need to pull up my numbers.
While you pull that up, Logan Sargent cost the team $4.3 million in damages. Alex Albon cost the team $2.7.
So double. I'm just going to quickly read off some numbers to you. I'll tell you what they are in a second. DNF 16, 20, 18, 20, 20, 13, 12, 18, 17, DNF 13, 14, DNF 10. That one's a lie. 16, 11, 16, 16. The 11, when you hear that number, you're like, wow, 11, that's great. Yeah, that was during a race when 6 people didn't finish.
Exactly.
14, you're like, oh, that's actually a big deal. Yeah, 5 people didn't finish that race either.
So really, you finished
in
front of one person, which is probably a Haas.
Averaging 17 and 18, 19, 20 the entire season.
Yeah.
So again, it's a hard sport, but guess what? You're playing with the big boys, and you gotta show up.
He has a second chance, though. He has a second chance. We can't control it. James has made the decision, not me, James Vowles, the team principal of Williams. He's made the decision. Sargent has a second chance. So we're either going to see the best season of Sargent's life, or we're going to see the last season of Sargent's life.
I'll put money on it right now.
That it's the last?
That it's the last.
Okay, well, I think he will actually perform next year. I actually have no idea why I think that, but I think Sargent can do it. I want an American in the sport to perform really well. And so maybe it's just my hope. I'll be praying for you, Sargent. I don't want the one American
in the sport to be the worst in the sport. Is that just our fate for the next decades?
No, maybe the next 5 years though, at least. Moving into Aston Martin, our next team, which scored 280 points. 74% of those from Fernando Alonso.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the other one, Stroll.
No, 26% of the points were earned by Lance Stroll, which oddly enough is 74 points, which is probably why you thought I said 74% was Alonso. They started out the year so strong. To me, this is like the downhill climb for them this season. They started the year so strong. Yeah. Alonso was out there saying that he was going to have his, P1, first P1, and Lord knows how long. They made some upgrades. Every upgrade they made just kept them further and further off the pace of the rest of the field. And then they finally switched back to the original car design that they had that was bringing them the results. The surprise for me with Aston Martin throughout this season was that Stroll towards the end of it flipped a switch.
He did.
And started turning on.
To his credit. You turned it on.
To his credit.
Good for you. You did your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Alonso had 2 DNFs. Stroll had 4. Alonso only had 1 fastest lap. For as competitive as he was, I was surprised by that. Stroll didn't have any. Races where Alonso was not in the top 5 were 11. Mm-hmm. So more than half, or just about actually half, he was in the top 5. Races where Stroll wasn't in the top 5 were 19. Story of the season. We all had Alonso fever.
Man, I still have Alonso fever.
I mean, who doesn't?
Guy's Alonso. A friggin' legend.
He stops to smell the flowers.
He sure does.
He stops to watch his teammate take an overtake on the big screen as he's driving.
While going 90 miles an hour corner.
He stops to think back to Australia and say, hey, there was a precedent set in Australia. We're going to make sure that one's, I mean, the guy's unreal.
So guy's playing 3-dimensional chess. He's a god among insects.
He's a phenomenal, the sport will be at another loss when he actually retires.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll ever leave the sport.
I hope he stays. Like, he would make an incredible team boss.
Yeah, he'd be phenomenal. So, I mean, I think the story of the season was just Alonso fever. We all had it, and rightfully so. I think for Stroll, I have the story of his season as I think he earned a seat. Like, we talk about things being given to him. This has been the narrative around Stroll since he ever got in, and he played into it at the beginning. He was like, yeah, like maybe my dad will let me have a seat. Like,
I don't know if he earned his seat. I don't know if I would say that much. He still only scored 26% of the points.
You will notice I have earned his seat ?
Okay. Well, I agree with the question mark of that. I don't think he did. I think Stroll has still got something to prove next year. The reality is this: if I were to take the last name out of this and just say team member 1 and team member 2, if they were matched, you look at a team like Ferrari, where Charles Leclerc had 206 points, Sainz had 200. If you were to then bring that up to Aston Martin and say Alonso has 206 and Stroll has 200 points, now Ferrari and Aston Martin have the exact same amount of points.
Yeah.
And that's what makes for a great F1 season, is competitive teams.
Yeah.
I think in my mind, the teams that I love to see are the teams that are so close. Like 51% of the points from Leclerc, 49% from Sainz. That's nothing. That they're pretty much neck and neck. You don't know who they're going to be. 57 for Hamilton, 43 for Russell. That's a really small margin.
Yeah.
But then you look at Alonso and Stroll, it's 74% of the points come from Alonso, 26 come from Stroll. You're like, this is not, you turn it on at the back half of the season, but if you don't come out of the gate swinging next year and your teammates that far ahead of you again, There was one point in the season where he had 170 points and Stroll had like 40 or 50. I think it was embarrassing.
I remember.
Like less than 3 times the amount of points that your teammate has.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, we this year have struggled with Stroll. I will say, you turned it around.
100%. I want to see the continue. Is what I'm saying.
Looking into next year as well, and seeing if you can continue that streak. Now, the man started the year with a broken hand.
100%. There were so many, and they had terrible luck.
Hand.
Oh my gosh, they had bad luck.
So it's like one of those things where it's like
there were some extenuating circumstances for sure. 26%. I don't know if it was that many circumstances.
Hard to say.
Hard to say. That's my whole thing.
Yeah.
On Aston.
That's all I've got as well.
Last team.
We settled for the mediocre vanilla team for our last team here.
I know. They're hot and spicy though because they have Ryan Reynolds and they have other stars that I don't know the names of.
Bros that want to look cool in F1.
Whoa. Are you going against Ryan Reynolds? Because I definitely love Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds is phenomenal. Okay, Ryan Reynolds can do anything he wants.
Yes,
100%. Ryan Reynolds,
100%.
And we'll all love it.
Yeah,
that's great. The other posse people that are part of it, I'm like, I don't really know why you're here. But Ryan, stay as long as you want. We'd love to have you. Alpine.
Give us the stats, Ben.
The Frenchman. So we had Gasly, we had Ocon, as the Vegas would say. So Gasly, this was really fascinating. DNFs, he only has 2 this year.
Yep.
His teammate has 6.
Which is wild to me.
And his teammate only finished a few points behind him.
Yeah.
With 4 more DNFs.
Yeah, but how many of those DNFs were Albon's fault?
You look into that. What I'm saying, though, is there's something to be said for
Ocon. I mean Ocon.
There's something to be said for how close this was. I think if Ocon didn't have that many DNFs, he'd actually finish ahead. I really think he would have. Because Gasly was only, I think, like 3-4 points ahead at the end of the year. 62 to 58. Yeah, he was 4 points ahead by the end of the year.
That's such a small margin.
Insane margin. Fastest lap, neither had a fastest lap. Races not in the top 5. Gasly was 21. Ocon, it was 20. Actually, Ocon was in the top 5 for a couple different races.
Yep.
Gasly had a podium.
Ocon had a phenomenal race in
Monaco.
Like it was insane.
Lights out.
It was wild.
Yeah, he was finished 3rd place. It was unreal.
It was unreal.
Like a dream. So I think for me, the story of the season for Gasly, you've got a guy and he asserts himself within a new team and he beats his teammate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You walk into someone's house, you say,
that's been there for years.
I'm going to rearrange the furniture. I make myself at home.
Yes.
And I'm going to eat your cake too. And I'm going to take your points. And I'm actually going to finish ahead of you. That's a really, really big deal. And so I think for Gasly, finishing ahead was a huge deal. The story of the season for Ocon, honestly, I think it comes down to reliability. It comes down to him not being able to finish 6 races. Again, there's always context, whether it's man or machine, that ultimately is responsible. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to finish 6 races, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
I need to look back through. I don't think anyone had as many DNFs as he did. I'm pretty sure he had the most. Now, we can end our recap on this. Remember Australia?
Oh, man, what a flippin' race.
We were talking about Australia at the beginning. In Australia, it's mayhem. Pandemonium. They are restarting the race. There's 2 laps.
Yeah, it was a
2-lap sprint to decide the race. The 2 Frenchmen are next to each other.
Side by side.
As they're going into, I think it was either turn 2 or turn 3, maybe. They both crash out. They were in an incredible
They crashed into each other.
They crashed into each other.
Yes.
They were in an incredible position
They would have gotten a massive amount of points hauled.
Huge points at the beginning of the season. They would have radically distinguished themselves.
It would have set them up in such a place of not having to be stressed out going into the rest of the season. It might have saved Otmar's job.
It saved Otmar's job. I mean, there's so many domino factors. That's not what happens, though. They both crash into each other. And that was one of their DNFs, as one of Gasly's DNFs was from Australia. And so, all that being said,
and they both admitted there were things that both of them could have done that was different.
They both took on the chin. They didn't blame each other, which was good.
The reality with Alpine is that they're the black sheep of the paddock for me. You've got everyone else has decided over the last few years your power units suck and they're super unreliable, so we're not going to do it. And so they're the only ones that have their own power unit. They're the only customer team of themselves. And their engine on top of that is underpowered in comparison to the rest of the grid. And then they're just kind of in the middle. They're above Williams by a significant amount.
Yeah.
But they're below Aston Martin by a significant amount.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what happens next year when they come in. The power unit probably isn't going to change that much. Yeah. It's going to come down to aero, and they haven't shown a huge advancement in that over this season. And so to me, I'm like, you guys are just kind of in no man's land until you guys don't even have a team boss right now. It's kind of run by consensus and management. There's a lot of drama around the way that the team is run. And
are they in a worse spot than Haas in some respects?
I think they are, because they have a ton of money, but I don't know if they necessarily have the person that's directing it in the right way.
Yeah, like Haas has no money. So until they get some money, things aren't going to change.
No.
Alpine has a ton of money. And they are 160 points away from their nearest competitor.
Well, they have a ton of money now. Yeah.
They have a ton of money now. They're 160 points away from Aston Martin, and they're 100 points clear of Williams.
Yeah.
So that no man's land, they're just out there. And it's like, at that point, who are you racing?
No.
You're not racing anyone.
I think we'll see them scrap in the first part of 2024 with the top of the mid pack.
Yeah.
And then I think we might see what we see again here, where they might pull away. But if AlphaTauri comes out like they ended this season, they could surpass them. If Williams comes out with a good car, they will surpass them.
Yeah.
I think we're looking at scary days for Alpine. I think Otmar is laughing at his house in England going, I tried to tell you guys it would take 100 races to do this.
Should have listened.
You can't rush it. Or Ben and I will be wrong, which doesn't happen often.
It's quite possible. We have been wrong before.
Yeah, but it's unlikely because we're so humble. Is that our last team?
That's our last team.
Oh my gosh. What a season. Overall, Ben, when you look back, what do you feel like was your favorite part of the entire season?
That's difficult because there's moments each weekend that made me fall in love with the sport all over again. When you see someone who's so passionate like Alonso, who's waited so long, who's arguably made some poor decisions on teams, but has finally got it right. Like, that was an incredible thing to watch.
Yeah. I agree.
Monaco qualifying with
wild.
Max that was one of the most incredible qualifying sessions I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it was.
It wasn't just
it was something to behold.
It was this moment where
I think all the drivers were like, "What?"
Every person who hated Max vehemently couldn't deny.
They couldn't stop
the god that showed up that qualifying session. I mean, but then like there's moments where you see Lando. Do you remember when Lando was leading Silverstone?
Yes, it was amazing.
What? Like,
it was wild.
And then Piastri's fighting with Max. And and McLaren's like, oh yeah, we've got some upgrades.
Yeah, we got some upgrades.
Like, I mean, so. And then it's difficult because there's so many different moments. But I think at the end of the day, like, I at the beginning was concerned because Max was so far ahead that the season would have little to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so thankful to be proven so wrong.
Agreed.
And it made me appreciate so much more about the sport. When it was almost like, yeah, that's decided. Now I can shift and focus on all those other things that I may not have seen.
I agree. I think to me, the season was amazing. My favorite part of it was, and this is so hard to say, is Red Bull's dominance. I stand back as a Formula One fan and I go, I don't think I'll ever see this again. And I don't know if the sport will ever see it again. Yeah. I think it was the world coming together with the regulation changes to make a moment like this happen. And who knows, maybe 2026, I'll be proven wrong and someone will come out with a brand new engine and that just rips the field apart. One can hope. But I stand back and I go, man, this is just an incredible season. I think there's a few standout moments for me. As weird as it is as a Mercedes fan, Austin was one of the funnest races to watch.
Yeah,
one
Austin
of the funnest weekends with the sprint race. All of it. I'm desperate to go to COTA. We need to go next year.
We'll do it.
It's such an incredible racetrack, and seeing Hamilton race like that again this year was such a highlight for me.
Yeah.
And then of course our race that we went to in Vegas was out of this world. So much fun.
Vegas was great.
Vegas was a ton of fun and lots of memories.
I was so happy to be proven so wrong by Vegas. Right.
Same. So much potential for the future.
So that I think was something, and I feel like the F1 community was proven wrong by Vegas.
Yeah, the Brits won't admit it. Europe doesn't agree. They're like, no, we do not like the Vegas. It's too much.
But even some of the most stalwart F1 original fans, which the Europeans love to say they are, were blown away by the Vegas race, which was incredible to see.
It was really cool. It was a historic season overall. Many incredible things happened in 2023, and our review of it is actually not over. This episode is over. Yep. But throughout the off season, we're going to be breaking down some of our favorite teams throughout this last season, whether that is how they did on track or the drama that was experienced off track as well. We're going to continue doing that. And then obviously keep you up to date on all of the things that are going on within the F1 community at the moment. I don't know about you, but I can't handle that the websites have stopped updating. So we are going to find out what is happening in Formula One and keep you up to date. As always, if you have enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe to us wherever you are listening, or like us on YouTube. And you can follow us on Instagram. And if you would like to stay up to date and have your chance to win the very expensive mugs that we drank this 2016 Bordeaux from tonight, mine has pineapples on it.
Mine's got flowers.
We are signing these and sending them to you. You can find the link to sign up for all things F1 Rolling Start in the show notes or wherever you're listening to this. Have a great rest of your week, folks.
Been a good season, folks. See you next week.